He fed two orphan girls a warm meal. 10 years later, a luxury spaceship appeared at his door. Marcus Chen wiped the rain from his weathered face as he locked the construction site gate behind him. The winter storm had come early this year, turning the December evening into a freezing nightmare. At 62 years old, his bones ached more than they used to, and all he wanted was to get home to his small house by the coast, maybe heat up some leftover stew, and fall asleep watching whatever was on television. The alley behind Giovanni's restaurant was his usual shortcut to the bus stop. The restaurant had closed down 3 months ago, another victim of the economic downturn that had hit their small coastal town hard. Marcus barely glanced at the dark windows as he passed, his mind already on the warm shower waiting for him at home. Then he heard it, a soft whimper almost lost beneath the howling wind. Marcus stopped. He was tired, cold, and every sensible part of his brain told him to keep walking. It was probably just a cat or a raccoon, but something made him turn around. Something made him look toward the dumpster at the far end of the alley. Two small figures huddled against the brick wall, partially hidden behind a stack of collapsed cardboard boxes. Children. Marcus's heart clenched. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them. They were girls, he realized as he got closer. One looked about 8 years old, the other perhaps 10. Their clothes were strange, like nothing he had seen in any store, made of some material that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light from the distant street lamp. But the shimmer was fading, and the fabric was torn and dirty. Both children were shivering violently, their lips blue with cold. The older girl looked up at Marcus with eyes that seemed oddly bright, almost luminescent in the darkness. She pulled her younger sister closer, a protective gesture that broke something in Marcus's chest. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of his own daughter when she was young and scared during thunderstorms, before she grew up and moved across the country with her own family. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down despite the protest from his knees. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The older girl shook her head slowly, understanding at least his question if not knowing how to answer in his language. Marcus looked around the empty alley. It was past 8 o'clock on a miserable winter night. The temperature was dropping fast, and these children were barely dressed for spring weather, let alone this. He made a decision that would change not just his life, but the fate of civilizations he could not even imagine existed. "Come with me," he said, gesturing toward the street. "It's okay, I'll help you." But there was also desperate hope. Marcus took off his heavy construction jacket and draped it over both girls. It swallowed them completely. Then he held out his hands. After a long moment, the older girl took one hand and her sister took the other. Their skin felt strange, almost like touching warm silk, and Marcus noticed their fingers were slightly longer than human fingers should be. But they were cold and shaking, and that was all that mattered. The bus ride to his house took 20 minutes. The few other passengers stared at the odd trio, but Marcus ignored them. The younger girl fell asleep against his shoulder, her breathing shallow and rapid. The older one stayed alert, watching everything with those strange, bright eyes. Marcus's house was small and shabby, nothing special, but it was warm. He led the girls inside and immediately turned up the thermostat. They stood in his living room, dripping rainwater onto the worn carpet, looking around at his simple furniture, his cluttered bookshelves, the framed photos of his late wife Sarah on the mantel. "First things first," Marcus said, mostly to himself since they could not understand him anyway. "You need to get out of those wet clothes and get warm." They were too big, of course, but they were dry and warm. He showed the girls to the bathroom, pantomimed taking a bath, and left them to it after making sure the water was not too hot. While they bathed, Marcus went to the kitchen. He was not much of a cook, never had been, but he knew how to make simple, filling food. He started rice in the cooker, heated up the vegetable beef stew from 2 nights ago, and made grilled cheese sandwiches because every kid he had ever known loved grilled cheese. He boiled water for hot chocolate and set out everything he could think of that might help: crackers, fruit, cookies from the pantry. The girls emerged from the bathroom looking slightly more human, though their hair had an odd quality to it that Marcus could not quite identify, like it was made of extremely fine threads of light rather than normal hair. They wore Sarah's clothes like oversized pajamas, sleeves and pant legs rolled up multiple times. Marcus gestured to the kitchen table, and the girls sat. When he placed the food in front of them, something remarkable happened. The older girl's eyes filled with tears. She said something in that musical language, and the younger girl began to cry as well. Then they ate. Marcus had never seen anyone eat like that. They were clearly starving, shoveling food into their mouths as if they had not eaten in weeks. He kept bringing more rice, stew, sandwiches, fruit, everything he had. They ate it all. The older girl finally slowed down, looked at Marcus, and placed her hand over her heart in a gesture that needed no translation. "Thank you." Over the next 3 days, Marcus tried to figure out what to do. He called social services, but the system was overwhelmed and backlogged. They told him it would be at least a week before someone could come out, and in the meantime, could he take them to the emergency shelter downtown? Marcus drove past that shelter on his way to work every day. It was overcrowded, understaffed, and in the grip of a flu outbreak. He could not do it. He could not take these strange, fragile children to that place, so they stayed. Marcus taught them simple English words while they taught him words in their language, though he could never quite pronounce them correctly. They drew pictures to communicate. Through these drawings, Marcus learned that the girls had been in some kind of accident, that they had been lost and alone. He learned that they missed their home, wherever that was. He learned that they were grateful. The younger girl, whom Marcus started calling Sophie because she needed a name he could pronounce, began to smile. She helped him cook, following his movements in the kitchen with intense concentration. The older girl, whom he called Lily, was more serious. She spent hours looking out the window at the sky as if waiting for something. On the 4th morning, Marcus woke to find them gone. His heart stopped. He searched the entire house, calling their names. Then he found the note on the kitchen table, written in shaky English letters that had clearly taken great effort. "Thank you." That was all. 2 words. Marcus sat at the kitchen table holding that piece of paper, and for the first time since Sarah died, he cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from a feeling he could not quite name. He hoped the girls had found their way home. He hoped they were safe. He hoped they remembered that someone had cared. 10 years passed. Marcus retired from construction. His life became quieter, smaller. He volunteered at the community center, fixed things for neighbors, tended his small garden. He thought about those 2 strange girls sometimes, wondered what had happened to them, hoped they were happy wherever they were. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, the sky above his house tore open with light, and everything changed. Marcus was watering his tomato plants when the shadow fell across his garden. He looked up, shading his eyes against the morning sun, and his watering can dropped from his hand. The spacecraft hung in the air above his small house like something from a dream. It was enormous, easily the size of a football field, but it made no sound at all. The hull seemed to be made of crystal or glass, but it shifted colors as Marcus stared, flowing from deep blue to silver to gold. Patterns of light moved across its surface like water, beautiful and impossible. Within seconds, the peaceful morning exploded into chaos. Marcus heard sirens in the distance. His neighbors poured out of their houses, pointing and shouting. Someone screamed. Cars stopped in the middle of the street. Far above, Marcus could hear the roar of military jets approaching. A section of the spacecraft's hull simply dissolved, and a platform descended on a beam of soft light. 2 figures stood on the platform, and as they came closer, Marcus's legs nearly gave out beneath him. They were tall and elegant, dressed in flowing robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality, like they were lit from within. Their eyes were the most striking feature, dark but filled with swirling colors like looking into a galaxy. They were clearly not human, but they were also unmistakably familiar. The platform touched down on Marcus's overgrown lawn. The 2 beings stepped off and approached him. Then, in a gesture that shocked everyone watching, they bowed deeply. "Father Marcus," the taller one said in perfect English, her voice carrying a musical quality that stirred something in Marcus's memory. "We have returned." His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The shorter of the 2 beings smiled, and suddenly Marcus saw past the alien features, past the impossible beauty and the strange eyes, and he saw something achingly familiar. "Sophie," he whispered. "Lily, where did you go? And now we have come back to find you." The entire world was watching, but Marcus could only stare at these 2 beings who had once been small, frightened children in his kitchen. "We need to talk," Lily said, glancing at the gathering crowd and military presence. "May we come inside?" "I think you better start from the beginning," he said, and so they told him. Lily and Sophie, whose real names were Lyria and Kithra, were princesses of the Ether and Combine, a civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. 10 years ago, their diplomatic shuttle had malfunctioned and crashed in the ocean 30 miles from shore. Their security team died in the crash. The two young princesses, injured and alone, managed to reach land, but their emergency beacon was damaged. They wandered for days, unable to contact their people, growing weaker from hunger and cold. "We were dying," Lyria said quietly, sitting on Marcus's old couch that Sarah had picked out 20 years ago. "Another day, maybe two, and we would have been gone. Then you found us. Our people certainly would not have." Compassion was seen as a weakness. Helping strangers, especially those who could offer nothing in return, was considered foolish and wasteful. "In our entire empire of 1 trillion souls across hundreds of worlds," Lyria said, "no one had ever shown us what you showed us that night. You gave us everything you had. You expected nothing in return. You did not even ask our names or where we came from. You just saw two children who needed help, and you helped." They could not comprehend that a being could be purely kind. "But Father Marcus, we have traveled to thousands of worlds in our long lives before we came to Earth. We have met hundreds of species. None of them, not one, would have done what you did without expecting payment or recognition." But they never gave up, and now they had found him and they had come with an offer. "We want you to come with us," Lyria said. "To our homeworld, we can give you anything you desire, wealth beyond measure. Our medical technology can extend your life, heal your body. You could have a palace, servants, anything." He thought about his friends and neighbors, his daughter who called every Sunday, his simple routines. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you want me there?" "Before we met you, we were being raised to be cold, calculating leaders. We were taught that mercy was weakness, that compassion was inefficient. Then you showed us a different way. Why do we not help those in need? Why do we measure everything by its productive value? Why have we forgotten how to care?" Our questions made many uncomfortable, but they also made some people think. They want to change our society to bring back compassion and kindness, but they need to see you. They need to know you are real, that what we described truly exists. An alien civilization wanted him to come teach them about kindness. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was also, somehow, exactly the kind of thing Sarah would have said he should do. "I need time to think," Marcus said finally. "This is a lot to take in." He looked at the photo of Sarah on the refrigerator, held in place by a magnet shaped like a sunflower. "What do you think, love?" he whispered to the photo. "Should I go?" Sarah had always believed that kindness was the most important thing in the world. She had volunteered at soup kitchens, fostered rescue animals, donated to every charity that asked. She would have loved those two scared little girls. And she would have said that if an entire civilization needed to learn about compassion, then someone should teach them. Marcus made his decision. When morning came, he walked out to the spacecraft with a small suitcase and a heart full of hope that maybe, just maybe, one warm meal given to two hungry children could change the stars themselves. The journey through space took 3 days, though Marcus had no real way to measure time anymore. The spacecraft moved faster than light itself. Lyria explained, folding space in ways that human science had not yet discovered. Marcus spent most of the journey staring out of the transparent walls of his quarters, watching stars streak past like rainfall, entire galaxies blooming and fading in the distance like flowers opening and closing. The ether and homeworld appeared before them like a jewel hanging in black velvet. 3 moons orbited the planet, each one larger than Earth's single moon. The planet itself glowed with a soft purple light, its atmosphere rich with elements that did not exist naturally on Earth. As they descended through the clouds, Marcus saw cities that stretched across entire continents, towers of crystal and light reaching toward the sky, transportation systems that moved silently through the air like schools of fish swimming through an ocean. The capital city was called Athernes Prime, and it was home to nearly 2 billion Etherans. The royal palace sat at the heart of the city, a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single piece of white stone that glowed from within. Gardens surrounded it, but the plants were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, beautiful but somehow cold, like looking at a mathematical equation rather than something alive and growing. Marcus's quarters in the palace were larger than his entire house back on Earth. The floors were made of something that felt like warm marble, but changed color based on his mood. The furniture adjusted itself automatically to his body. A wall of windows overlooked the city, and he could see flying vehicles moving in orderly streams between the towers, never deviating from their designated paths. But Marcus had insisted on one thing before he agreed to stay. He did not want to live in luxury while he tried to teach people about compassion. He wanted something simple, something real. After much discussion, the princesses arranged for him to have a small residence in the lower districts of the city, where the less successful Etharans lived, those who had not achieved high ranks in their society's complicated hierarchy. The lower districts were still more advanced than anything on Earth, but they were also more crowded, more chaotic. Here, the buildings were older and less maintained. The streets had actual dirt and debris. The Etharans who lived here worked in basic services, manual labor, food production. They were the ones that the upper classes considered barely worth noticing. Marcus started simply. He found an abandoned building that had once been some kind of community gathering space. With help from Kithra, who seemed to delight in getting her hands dirty despite her royal status, Marcus cleaned it out. They set up tables and chairs. They installed a kitchen using equipment that Marcus barely understood but learned to operate. Then Marcus did what he had done 10 years ago in a cold alley on Earth. He started feeding people. The first day, only 3 Etharans came. They were suspicious, confused. Why was this alien human giving away food for free? What did he want in return? Marcus just smiled and handed them bowls of hot soup. He had learned to make it using local ingredients, though it took him weeks to figure out which Etharan vegetables were safe for him to eat and which ones would make him sick. "No payment," Marcus said through the translation device that Lyria had given him. "Just eat. Everyone deserves a warm meal." When they finished, Marcus simply wished them well and invited them to come back anytime. Word spread slowly through the lower districts. More people came. 5, then 10, then 20. They came hungry and suspicious, and they left fed and confused. Some of them started to return regularly. They began to talk to Marcus, to tell him about their lives. He learned about Torvin, who had lost his position as a data analyst after making a single mistake, and could not find work anymore because the system had marked him as unreliable. He learned about Serena, whose child had been born with a genetic condition that made him learn slower than other children, and who struggled to afford the special care he needed. He learned about Kethais, an elderly Etharan who had worked in maintenance for 70 years and now lived alone in a tiny apartment, forgotten by a society that valued only productive members. Marcus listened to all of them. He fed all of them. And slowly, carefully, he started to teach. "Where I come from," he told Torvin one evening as they washed dishes together, "we believe that everyone deserves a second chance. One mistake does not define your entire life. What if sometimes helping someone who is struggling creates something more valuable than profit?" He simply showed them a different way of seeing the world, and he let them decide for themselves what to think about it. Young Etharans started to appear at the community center. They were curious about this human and his strange ideas. They came from upper districts, from wealthy families, drawn by rumors of someone who gave without expecting anything in return. Marcus put them to work immediately. He taught them to cook, to serve food, to clean. He treated a princess's nephew exactly the same as he treated Torvin the failed data analyst. "In my world," Marcus told them as they worked, "we have a saying, we are all equal in the things that matter most. Everyone gets hungry, everyone gets cold. Everyone needs kindness." One evening after everyone else had left, Vex approached Marcus with tears in his luminescent eyes. "I have spent my entire life being told that worth is measured by achievement," Vex said. "That those who fail deserve nothing, but you have shown me that this is wrong. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves care. How did we forget this? Maybe it is just buried deep, waiting for someone to remember." Torvin found new confidence and landed a job with a small company willing to give him a chance. Serena met other parents of children with special needs, and they formed a support group. Kethais started teaching young Etharans about the old days, sharing stories and wisdom that the culture had dismissed as worthless. The community center became more than just a place to get food. It became a place where people mattered, where everyone was welcome, where the old Etheran rules about worth and value did not apply. It became a small pocket of Earth in the heart of an alien empire, but not everyone was happy about it. Marcus started to hear rumors. Some of the High Council members were angry. They saw his center as a threat, a dangerous idea that could undermine their entire social structure. There were whispers about shutting him down, about sending him back to Earth. Then everything changed in a single day. News arrived of a disaster on one of the mining moons. A massive collapse had trapped 300 workers deep underground. The High Council met to discuss the situation, and their decision was swift and cold. The rescue would cost too much. The workers were mostly low-level laborers, easily replaced. It would be more efficient to write them off and hire new workers than to spend the resources needed to save them. When Marcus heard this decision, something inside him broke. He had been patient. He had been gentle. He had tried to teach through example, but this was too much. 300 people were going to die because a council of comfortable leaders had decided they were not worth saving. Marcus walked into the royal palace and demanded an audience with the emperor himself. The emperor's throne room was vast enough to hold 1,000 people. The ceiling disappeared into shadows high above, and the walls were covered in screens showing data streams from across the Combine's empire. The emperor himself sat on a raised platform, an ancient being who had ruled for over 3 centuries. His eyes held the weight of billions of decisions, and his face was as cold and perfect as carved ice. Marcus stood before him, a 63-year-old human in simple clothes, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Around the room, members of the High Council watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Lyria and Kithra stood near the throne, their faces worried but supportive. "Emperor Thuron," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I have come to ask you to reconsider your decision about the mining accident. They say you have disrupted our lower districts with your primitive notions of charity. If that is disruptive, then perhaps your system needs disrupting." "You wish to discuss the mining incident," the emperor said. 300 workers trapped beneath rock and ice. The council has determined that a rescue operation would cost more than the workers' productive value to the Combine. It is a logical decision based on resource allocation. You are going to let them die because saving them is inconvenient. The net result would save more lives in the long term. And every single one of them is worth saving, even if it costs you everything. Our civilization has thrived for 10,000 years using these principles. I have seen people thrown away because they made mistakes or were not born perfect. I have seen loneliness and despair in a civilization of billions. You have everything except the one thing that matters most. You have forgotten how to care about each other, Marcus said simply. You have built an empire of cold efficiency, and you have lost your souls in the process. He had probably just destroyed everything he had built, but he could not stay quiet. Not about this. "The rescue is not possible," the emperor said finally. "Even if we wish to attempt it, our engineers estimate a success rate of less than 30%. We do not have equipment designed for such operations. We do not have personnel trained in rescue work under those conditions. It would be sending more people to die for a small chance of saving a few." Council members shouted. The emperor raised his hand again, commanding silence. "Explain," Thuron demanded. "Give me access to ships and basic equipment," Marcus said. "I will take volunteers from my community center. We will attempt the rescue ourselves. If we fail, the cost is on us, not your empire, but we will not abandon those people." An elderly human and a group of lower district failures attempting a rescue that our best engineers say is nearly impossible. Father Marcus saved my life when I was lost and dying. He taught me that every life has value. I volunteer to help with this rescue. Then Vex, the young Etheran from the industrial family, spoke up from where he stood among the crowd of observers. "I volunteer as well." Within minutes, hundreds had volunteered. The emperor watched this unprecedented display with an unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke. "Very well, you may make your attempt, but understand this, human. When you fail, and you will fail, the council's decision will stand as proven correct. Resources will not be wasted on sentiment. We have people who believe that every life is worth saving, and that belief makes us stronger than any calculation. Around him were nearly 500 volunteers, many of whom had never been off-planet before. They had brought whatever equipment the palace engineers were willing to spare, which was not much. They had basic cutting tools, medical supplies, and portable life support systems. Lyria approached Marcus as he studied the diagrams of the collapsed mine. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "I am a retired construction worker, not a professional rescuer. I have no idea if we can actually do this. Because 10 years ago, I found two small girls freezing in an alley. Every logical part of my brain told me to walk away. They were not my responsibility. Helping them was inconvenient and possibly dangerous. But I helped them anyway because it was the right thing to do. This is no different." Marcus was impressed by how quickly they worked together, Etherans from different castes who would normally never speak to each other, coordinating and supporting one another. The rescue was brutal. They worked for 18 hours straight, cutting through collapsed tunnels, shoring up unstable sections, working in shifts because the heat underground was nearly unbearable. Marcus worked alongside everyone else, his old body screaming in protest, but he refused to stop. Several times, they encountered sections where the sensors showed no life signs, and Marcus insisted they check anyway. In one of those supposedly dead sections, they found 47 workers who had managed to create a small air pocket. They were alive, barely, and they wept when they saw the rescue team. More teams pushed deeper. They lost contact with one group for 3 terrifying hours before finding them trapped by a secondary collapse. No one left anyone behind. When one volunteer was injured by falling debris, 3 others immediately moved to help, even though it meant slowing down the rescue. 29 hours after they began, they brought the last survivor to the surface. 300 miners had been trapped. 283 were rescued alive. 17 had died in the initial collapse before the rescue even began. Marcus collapsed on the frozen ground, his lungs burning, his hands bleeding through his gloves. Around him, volunteers celebrated and cried and held each other. Etherans from the highest families embraced workers from the lowest districts. For this one moment, all the rigid social hierarchies had dissolved, and they were simply people who had done an impossible thing together.